Hello everybody, today we are talking about the $7,500 tax credit that is currently in place. There's two things I really want to dig into here. Well, this is actually the second time I sat down to make this video. It's just there's so many just very confusing parts about this tax credit, which is all the more reason that I should be making this video and making sure that I do my best job to convey how it works. So the two things we're going to cover is, well, what is the current status of our existing tax credit and how does it exactly work, especially for people interested in buying the Ford Lightning and maybe who have been banking on getting that $7,500. And in fact, most of you might not get that full $7,500. So we'll get into that. And then I also want to just talk about how it's kind of an unfair tax credit that we have right now. It really just doesn't make sense. And I just want to give my thoughts on the situation and why I think we need a better one. I don't know if the $12,500 that was proposed is the actual better solution, but I do think it's better than what we have right now. So we're going to cover all that. And I want to do a disclaimer on this time I'm doing this video, just because this is not my field of expertise. I'm trying to do my best to learn something that's semi-complex and dumb it down for people like myself. So if I get a couple things wrong, please bear with me, but I really think this time I got it locked in. So let's get into the details. Okay, so the first and most basic part of the tax credit is how it works per manufacturer. So every make of vehicle is given 200,000 units of EVs, and that includes their actual EVs and then their hybrids too. And now hybrids is a whole nother video because depending on the size of their battery depends on how big of a tax credit they get, but they do count towards the list of the 200,000. So once a manufacturer hits 200,000 EVs sold, they are no longer eligible for this tax credit. So then a phase out happens. So we'll talk about the phase out in just a moment here, but I do want to talk about where Ford stands as of the hitting their 200,000 limit. So as you can see on the graphic on the screen, Ford has sold 123,030 vehicles. And that means they have 76,970 left to go. So there's been projections that they'll hit that number towards the end of this current year, maybe sooner, depending on how many EVs they can manufacture this year, because the demand's there. People will buy these. It's more of how fast Ford can build them rather than if people will buy them. So keep a close eye. I have this website. I'll try to link it. You can go to EV adoption. They have a tracker for every vehicle manufacturer and where they're at with sales towards the tax credit. So keep an eye on that. But next we should talk about what happens when Ford hits that, because the good news is it isn't an immediate phase out. It doesn't immediately stop. So basically there's 4 quarters worth of a tax credit after they hit that 200,000 mark. So it starts at 7,500. They sell that 200,000th car. Then the very next quarter, that is reduced in half. So if they do it at the beginning of a quarter, it's okay. They'll still get the tax credit, so they get a little extra cushion. But the very next quarter, it's cut in half, and it will stay at half for 2 full quarters. After that, the next 2 quarters, it is then cut in half again, reducing at every 2 quarters. So the good news is for the next probably 1.5 to 2 years, if you're buying a Lightning, if you're buying a Mach-E, you will be eligible for some sort of tax credit, which is great. Okay, so now to the kind of complex part and also the unfair part. So, so the tax credit of $7,500 goes to people whose tax liability is $7,500 and higher. Basically, you need to roughly have made $65,000 in the last year to have a tax liability of $7,500. Now, of course, there's other tax and rebates and write-offs to have made that number lower, which means, let's say you had $20,000 in write-offs, you would have actually had to make $80,000-ish to have that $7,500. So go back into your taxes. You can look at your liabilities and see what it was for last year to see if you're eligible for this full credit. And now 65 to 85,000 a year is a pretty high salary, in my opinion. I think that your average person isn't making that much, and they probably don't have that amount of liabilities. So what happens to the people who aren't making $7,500? Well, they can still get a rebate. However, it's only the amount that they had a liability for. So if, let's say, they made like $50K a year and their tax liability was around, I don't know, let's just say 5,000-ish, they would only get 5,000 for their rebate. And to me, that's just totally lopsided. And in fact, the people with the lower income probably deserve more of a tax credit for taking a swing and getting this EV and helping push our, green initiative further, I think. And it goes double a case for hybrids, because actually hybrids actually help the environment a little more in most states. So I really it's flipped on its head. And it seems like it's more set up to incentivize the people who already have the money to buy the electric car and don't really need the discount. So I just want to kind of dumb this down and say it again. So basically, you need to have made a certain amount of salary last year, or this tax year that you bought this vehicle, and that would have had to have been enough to have the tax liability of $7,500 to even receive the tax credit. So again, I can't dig into every situation because there's so many variabilities I'm finding about this, because like I said, if you have a certain amount of deductions to the point where your tax liability is only $2,000 or something, then you just simply won't get the full, you'll just get $2,000. That's how it works. And again, it has nothing to do with what you've paid into over the years. So your withholding from your check doesn't affect that number for the rebate. So basically, here's another example. If you've paid into your check, let's say here's a great example. If you've owed $7,500 exactly, and then you have paid in over the year, let's say $8,500, you would actually get a check back for $8,500 because you've overpaid $1,000, and then as well you have got this tax credit, so you'd get an additional $7,500. Hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully it was right because again, this is still kind of fresh in my head. So let's summarize with this why I think the actual new proposed tax credit makes more sense. Well, it simply goes to the fact that it's point of sale and it's eligible regardless of your tax liability. Right there is a big change that we need. The one that we have now is literally helping cut costs for the government and helping the people who are already making a lot of money get discounts on electric vehicles. And it simply isn't. It isn't working, because especially if you look at the demand on higher priced vehicles like Tesla, they're already pushed out a year to buy one. That kind of proves that we don't need incentives for people who can afford expensive electric vehicles. It's just simply not the case. However, something like a Mach-E and a Lightning, where they're reasonably, well, the Lightning, we'll talk about that later, but there are versions of the Lightning that are under $50,000. That seems like a normal price between like 30 and 40. If you're spending that on a vehicle, that relates to more of your everyday people who are probably making 50 or 60,000 a year. So we need to help and make sure those people are incentivized and not these people. So, and as you can tell, I'm worked up because the more and more I research this, the more and more I realize the flaws in it and how it basically just sucks. It just sucks. So I'll end with briefly talking about the proposed tax credit and why it's better. Now, the proposed one, we should very much make clear that is probably not happening, as it is wrapped in with the Build Back Better that is not looking like it will pass. But this version of the tax credit and similar versions to it actually have a great place, I think, in our world. And the way this one worked was as a point of sale credit. And so it immediately is deducted off the price of the vehicle, regardless of who you are. And I think that is absolute the way it should be. Now, I also think the current one that was about to pass, it had this $4,000 additional tax credit that was when it was union made. And I do kind of like that because it incentivized, people not only buying EV, but buying American UV. And I think that's great for the economy. However, the $12,000 discount is pretty steep. That's a pretty steep discount or tax credit, whatever you want to call it. And maybe it's too much. I mean, I like it because I'm in the market for an EV, and I'm sure you are too. So we kind of have a lopsided opinion about it. But as a whole, my guess is something closer between 8 and 10K tops is probably where it should be. And that's enough to definitely incentivize people still, but also kind of make sure that we are not maybe overspending on something that's still pretty new, hopefully. But again, what do I know? I'm just a guy. And I also think that plug-in hybrids should probably get a really close, if not the same discount as full electric vehicles. And there's a great video, Engineering Explained, made, and it's how actually most states, depending on where they get their energy, whether it's from coal or wind or whatever, and in places that are making their energy from natural resources, it makes more sense to drive a hybrid. So we're not to the point where we should be incentivizing fully electric, because I mean, I don't know, that maybe that's a topic for a whole nother video, but I just wanted to state that, in some cases, a plug-in hybrid is the absolute best you could do for the environment, if that's why we're incentivizing these. I think full electric also helps with high gas prices now. So I know that's a big problem that people are stating. Gas prices are up. I wouldn't know because I drive a Tesla. I promise I'll never become a person like that. No, for real though. Prices are going up, and I do think if we can have a crisp incentivization and there's a lot of stock of electric vehicles, that could really help things. And I think it could really spark a lot, because again, if there's more of a demand for electric infrastructure too, then more EV charging stations will pop up, and because of a necessity, and it helps us push forward to the final thing I'll say is I'm not a guy who thinks that everyone should be driving all electric. That's just impractical and silly. But I do think if you're a 2-car household, it does make sense to have one electric, one gas for every situation. Or maybe a electric and a hybrid, or 2 hybrids actually is probably the best. But at this point, I'm rambling. I'm all worked up. I just really wanted to stress that my biggest point of this video is to help people who were really counting on the tax credit without knowing the details. Because on Ford's website, they're not doing a good job. In fact, they're using it as a selling point when in fact, I would guess 50% or so of their customers won't even be eligible for the full tax credit, if not a quarter of it. So I don't think that's fair to be advertising it without a disclaimer. I think that's kind of messed up, especially because this information is not easy to find. And in fact, it's pretty complex. I thought I fully understood it, and it turns out I didn't. So as a little outro here, I do apologize. I packed a lot into this video. I rambled a little bit. So if you're still with me, you absolutely rule. Thank you so much for sticking around. And if I got a couple numbers wrong or something, I do apologize for that too. Again, I'm not a tax guy. I'm just trying to convey the overall situation for everyone. And if you have questions, I'll do my best to try to answer them. So feel free to ask. And thank you to everyone who commented on the first version of this video that I took down, because I did get some of that information wrong. So it might have took 2 versions of this video to get it all in there, but this is the good one, I think. You guys are the absolute best, and I look forward to another great week of videos right around the corner.